Well, I think one very interesting and potentially quite disturbing, possibly, area of development in science is our increasing ability to manipulate the genetic makeup of animals. If we take the example of farm animals, for many generations we've been selectively breeding them to grow more quickly, produce more eggs and so on, to be more productive. But increasingly in recent times we've also been selectively breeding them on certain behavioural characteristics. For example, when lots of pigs are kept together, and particularly in a confined space, they can be quite aggressive to each other, particularly when unfamiliar pigs are introduced. So some work has been done at whether there is a genetic link to aggression and whether therefore aggression can be reduced in the pig population, the farmed pig population. So that's, I think, moving into a very potentially controversial area where we are changing the basic behavioural characteristics of a species. And if you take it through to its logical conclusion, we may, in years to come, be able to breed a farm animal that actually doesn't suffer. It doesn't suffer physical pain, it doesn't suffer fear or distress. So from a behavioural point of view, there isn't an issue. So you could say the welfare box is ticked. We have a farm animal that however we keep it, however we treat it, it isn't going to suffer. But ethically speaking, there are huge questions there about whether we should be going down this route. I mean, in a way, some might say we're playing God. We're making big decisions about whether that pig or those cattle should be changed such that their behaviour is unrecognisable with the original. What makes a pig a pig? You know, what is pigness? Are we going to lose that intrinsic pigness of the pig by changing its behaviour to that extent? And I think those are the kind of questions that society will, I think, struggle with as we get more power, as scientific developments enable us to have that power to move to those kinds of situations. And I think it illustrates really well how there can sometimes be real conflict between what might be good for welfare and where we might want to go or feel we should be going ethically. And there's another very interesting development as well, which I think will lead to some quite fascinating debates, and that is the development of meat, in vitro meat. So meat produced in the laboratory, not coming from animals. And initial reactions to that have been interesting and rather mixed, where some people actually say they wouldn't want to eat it, others would still prefer to eat the animal. Others, of course, see it as a way of continuing to eat the kind of food they like, and maybe, if it's mass-produced, to solve the world's hunger problems, and, of course, it doesn't cause any suffering, depending on what tests may have to be done on that meat, depending on the way in which it's actually grown in the laboratory, but it won't ultimately perhaps need to involve any animals at all. So I think that's another very interesting scientific development that could cause us to think very carefully about why it is we eat meat, why it is that our meat, you know, we're prepared to and comfortable with eating meat from animals.
Help them make these decisions.
I think there are some guiding principles that it's useful for everyone to bear in mind when thinking about how they face these dilemmas and how they work them out, either as a society or as an individual. One of them is certainly never to take anything at face value, never to assume anything, always to look behind what appears to be obvious, never to think that there is only one way at looking at things, always to consider the bigger picture and to look at all available evidence. Clearly there are a lot of other things other than scientific evidence that do impinge on decisions, but that needs to be the first base. What evidence is available to tell me either A, B or C? What other factors do I need to bring in when I'm thinking about the situation in hand? And then on a personal basis, having to decide what your own moral boundaries are as well. And those will be different for everybody.